I'd love to share with you from my personal experience the difference between the dark night of the soul and an initiation. They're quite different in their purpose, in their experience, and in our ability to navigate them as well. So I will briefly describe, or however spirit will guide us, I will describe each one, and then I'll share with you the stories, and then I'll share with you the tools, suggested tools and practices. Because one thing that I found to be true, darlings, it's an archetypal experience. Meaning, if you are a human being, it's only a matter of time. You're going to experience either the first one or the second one, right? And if you're working with people, if you are maybe a coach or a mentor or a teacher or a facilitator or a trainer, it is incredibly valuable to know these processes. And when your students or your clients, or maybe your children, maybe your partner, will go through this archetypal accelerated spiritual growth experience, you'll be more aware of how to hold space, right? How to love them, how to hold, that field of pure acceptance and field of a witness for somebody else's process. Welcome, darlings. I'm Katerina Satori. Some of you never met me before. I do these live streams. It's one of my way of serving to the community. And I was born and raised in Russia, and I felt like my first initiation started in the womb, baby. That's right, in my mama womb. So life began training me for what I do right now, being a guide fathers. Life has been training me since really, really early age. And my first existential crisis was at the age of 12. Let me know in the comments what was the first existential crisis when the world felt so dark for you? At the age of 12, I still lived in Soviet Russia. I was reading really dark, intense existential books by Dostoevsky and Leo Tolstoy, right? So I was questioning this reality at a very, very early age. But one of the differences between dark night of the soul and initiation is the state of consciousness. These experiences will happen. Typically, the dark night of the soul occurs to a person who has not gone through a spiritual awakening just yet. So another way to say it, it's a dark night of the ego, right? So ego detonation process. Ego detonation process. And it's like, you can observe somebody will begin to be curious about spirituality, maybe being drawn to spirituality, and then their soul decides to put the foot on the gas and accelerate that process. And usually they will go through their very first dark night of the soul. And I will go deeper into that, right? But initiation usually comes to us when we already committed our life to service to spirit. We gave the control of our ego to our higher self. And initiations will happen at every leap of our consciousness. It's something that we will continue to receive by the grace of the divine spirit. Initiation is a great honor. It's not a punishment. It's always an honor to receive a test, to receive a purification, right? So this is the big difference I would love to share with you, what I observe, right? And we're going to go deeper into each one. So the dark night of the soul usually has these common characteristics. It has a detonation of the ego, right? It has a crisis of faith. When a person goes through the first dark night of the soul, every single belief structure that was holding their view of the world together will begin to crumble. And it usually begins to crumble because of the shock, of unexpected shock of some kind of pain, right? Maybe it's a health crisis. I went through that one. Maybe it's a really, really bad breakup. Maybe it's where you meet somebody and you think this is your match, this is your soulmate and the twin flame, and then boom, this dream of raising children and grandchildren together completely falls apart, right? And you begin to fall apart with the dream. So some kind of an unexpected event that shakes our foundations of belief structures and makes us question the benevolence of this universe. This is a really key part. When we are in a dark night of the soul, we begin to question the goodness of the universe. We begin to question, is it a really benevolent universe? Or is it a jungle that I have to claw my way out? And usually this is the first, with the dark night of the soul, it's a detonation of the ego, right? So the ego is trying to keep the understanding of the world. It's trying to keep everything how it used to be. And the soul on the spiritual plane, right? From a spiritual perspective, the whole interest of the soul is for our growth and mastery of this physical plane. So from a perspective of the soul, nothing can harm us. And this is probably one of the reasons I felt so deeply to bring this message as a spiritual counsel for some heart out there, for some soul out there that maybe got tired swimming through the turbulent waters of life. And I am here to simply remind that soul that from a spiritual perspective, nothing can harm your eternal being. Your physical body, on the other hand, is very vulnerable, right? It's very vulnerable to some kind of unexpected event, a loss of a job, a sickness, loss of a partner. And the first experience of dark night of the soul usually helps us make a new choice to identify with the soul instead of to identify with the mortal body. This is one of the main reasons of the dark night of the soul. But every single physical construct of safety and security and status begins to crumble. We begin to look within and begin to find some solace within our hearts. Detonation of the ego, and the reward of the dark night of the soul is a mystical reunion with the divine. It's one of the biggest pains of a human heart is the pain of a separation from God, from Goddess, from a great spirit, whatever name you desire to call that prime creator consciousness, that source consciousness. So it's the biggest split of a human heart, feeling that separation. So the dark night of the soul is a great gift to return us back to the union with our creator or creatrix. You choose. For the source consciousness, doesn't matter what you call it. As long as you find your own way to link your human heart with the heart of the divine. My prayer that I say every morning, I connect with the Mother God and I say, Great Mother, thank you for keeping me in your heart today. I don't keep God in my heart. I remember that the God, Goddess, Divine Spirit keeps me in her heart. So every morning I wake up and I say, Great Mother, thank you for keeping me in your heart. This is the safest place for me to be. This is why I am married to uncertainty. I'm in romance with unknown. And the moment I stopped insisting on knowing how my path unfolds, my path began to unfold in the most miraculous and magical way. But we are going to arrive there when I begin to share with you about initiation. How are you receiving this, darlings? How are you receiving this? Let me take a look. Yeah, so to sum it up, for those of you who just joined, the dark night of the soul, when it happens for you first time, it's incredibly disorienting. My first dark night of the soul lasted for 2 years. 2 years. And I tried to fix that state of being. I used every single toolbox that I had. I was already addicted to listening to Tony Robbins. My dark night of the soul was 2008. So that's almost 11 years ago. I already listened to the Tony Robbins, and I think I was listening to Wayne Dyer, but I was not super into my spiritual path, but was quite aware, and I left my full devotion of spiritual path because I had so much just a dark, not dark, but bitter taste in my mouth from a traditional religion. So I had religious scars, and I tried to push away religion. I tried to, kind of not have anything to do with it. And I just tried to live by my head, by my personality, pretty much by my ego. And I got away with that way of living for a few years until my soul was ready to grow and to expand. And how does your soul helps you to grow? It gives you your first dark night of the soul. And mine came from my very first heartbreak. I met this man who I thought was my match, matching everything, physical, spiritually, emotionally, and everything. And, you begin to build this picture perfect life in your head. And then one day you realize it was just an illusion, and it crumbles in your head, in your hands. But what was shocking for me to realize, darlings, my first dark night of the soul, it was like the dark cloud kept hanging above me. And I would wake up with loss of motivation, with loss of inspiration. Just everything was dark and heavy. And for the very first time in my life, I felt this deep empathy for people who live in the dark. I never had that experience. And for the first time, I had to learn that experience of being in the dark. And I tried to fix that state of being with every single tool available to me, and nothing worked. I kept becoming more restless, more irritated, and more hopeless, until I realized the only thing that would help me feel better was going in the park and holding my hands on the trunk of a tree. It was an intuitive guidance. It was simply an intuitive guidance. I didn't know about the trees. But something told me, just put your hands on the tree and allow the tree to hold you. And I was talking to this one tree. I would come to the tree every single day, and I would align my spine next to the tree and just allowed myself to be there. And that gave me a little bit of relief. Then I ran to India, tried to heal my heart. So it's a long story, but this was my first dark night of the soul, disorienting, hopeless, and it feels like you will never get out of it. That's another characteristic of a dark night of the soul. It feels like it will never end. If you feel like it's never going to end, hold strong, my heart, it will end. It has its cycle, its season. It's like a winter of your soul, right? Where everything has to shed and everything has to go into the soil. And you have to turn into this naked tree with no leaves. And it feels like you will never have any new leaves, right? That's how it felt. That's how it felt. That's how it feels, right? So I brought 2 books to share with you. So if you're a guide for others, darling, and if a client comes to you with the dark night of the soul, now you're more equipped to understand what they're going through, right? And really the first step I always, whenever I guide somebody through dark night of the soul, is helping them to make connection with nature. They will resist it a lot. They will not think it's important, but anyway, you can take them on walks with you. And it's a loving, loving presence and just being with the person and help them connect with nature. I brought to you this masterpiece of Khalil Gibran, The Prophet. Let me know in the comments if you read this book. I brought 2 books for you that will just and must be in your spiritual library. So this is called The Prophet, and it's a book of, there's these dialogues on the people of the village ask this man, mystical man. His name in the book is The Prophet, and they say, well, speak to us about love, speak to us about service, speak to us about teaching. And somebody from the crowd said, teach us about pain. And this is such an exquisite passage that I wanted to share with you. And a woman spoke, saying, tell us of pain. And he said, your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so must you know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief. Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is the bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen. And the cup he brings, though it burned your lips, has been fashioned of the clay, which the potter has moistened with his own sacred tears. Our pain is just as sacred as our joy. Every cup of pain and grief that we receive has first been wiped away. The cup has been filled with the tears of the Great Spirit. The one thing that always carries me through the intensity of initiation or the turbulence of the path of being human is that if I feel the turbulence, the great divine cosmic mother that is in every cell of my being feels what I feel at the same moment that I feel it. If there is only one consciousness, if there is only one of us, whatever you experience in the moment, the great spirit that animates your soul, experience it with you. I'm going to plant that seed with you, darlings. It is so powerful. I recommend to you to receive this book, The Prophet. When you read the chapter that he talks about love, it will simply move your soul. This idea of romance that we are being told in the movies and in romance novels, you will laugh at that storyline when you read about the true power and the meaning of love. That if love finds us worthy, it comes on its own schedule, in its own way, and it has its own gifts and lessons for us. Are you ready to go into the initiation? I feel a lot of you will resonate with when initiation comes your way. Usually initiation comes when you made a decision to surrender yourself to the service of spirit. I will never forget my moment of surrender to the service of spirit. It was summer of 2015, I believe, 5 years ago. And I had this prayer. I was in such deep breakdown, breakdown of all the structures that used to support me, all my old ways of living and being and making a living and relating. Everything was just going through divine examination. And I remember the moment I could just create a surrender ceremony. And I was in my room and I sat down and I said this prayer of dedication of my life. And I said, from this moment on, I will not dictate how my life will go. I choose to live in absolute trust and absolute listening to the voice of the Spirit and surrender my life to Spirit. It was a really exquisite prayer, right? And when you have that experience of surrender, you walk through a new portal, literally. You are entering a new level of consciousness. So if dark night of the soul is detonation of the ego to awaken the consciousness, initiation literally translates entering into new, entering into new, entering into a new state of consciousness, entering into a new way of being, entering into a new way of leading, creating. And especially if you feel in your heart, your assignment is to be on a leadership path. Doesn't matter how big your leadership will get. You lead your family. That's a powerful way to lead. You lead your community. But especially if you know your assignment is to be on the path of leadership, the way how leaders get purified, they get purified in the fire of alchemy, in the fire of transformation. So initiation comes to you when you're on the path of leadership. And what I observe, darlings, you will find your own experience. You will find your own wisdom. I'm just sharing kind of like from the hawk view, what I observe. There's a theme. Each initiation has a theme. It has a flow. It has a process. What I observe, the goal of initiation is purification. If you remember that, then you will be able to stay strong, surrendered, but strong. You can be going through such fire of purification, and you can be the deepest openness of your heart. And with each initiation, you will learn to panic less and surrender more. So usually purification from three things: purification of our motives, purification of our desires. I did ask you to bring a journal. Maybe somebody will transcribe this live stream. So there's usually three ways we're being purified through initiation: motives, desires, and our insistence on control. Right? So in the purification of our motives, what helps me, darlings, is always asking myself, do I serve the self or do I serve the source? If I serve the self, my small self, my personality self, right? My service is going to be, it's not going to have any lasting power. It doesn't have a support of the universe. When I serve the source, everything is supported because I serve the great spirit and the greater good. So if my heart is rooted in the truth that when I serve the source, I am infinitely loved, I am infinitely protected, I am always divinely guided. Initiation comes also to purify us from our old survival fears. You know, the ones that we learned to model after our mom and our dad? If you look at your family conditioning, how did your mom react when she was worrying about the future? Right? How did your dad react when he was worried about the future? So usually we pick up a combination of those behaviors, of those reactions to life. And when you are on the path of living in devotion to spirit, service to greater good, your higher self will be helping you to purge out those fears that blocking your own brilliance. Imagine how much space that old fear takes up in your psyche, right? And how much light it can liberate if you allow the alchemy to occur. And for your light to transform the shadow. Hello, beautiful. How are you receiving all of this? I'm looking at your comments. So this is the difference between the dark night of the soul and initiation. And you know, when initiation comes my way, I went through a really deep initiation in 2016, 2017, 2018, you know? And each round was such a divine honor to go through, because it opens your eyes to so many things. You know, you begin to see the fears that hide in your psyche, the thoughts, you know, the worry thoughts and the fear thoughts, and you just begin to lovingly embrace them and alchemize them with your love. It's a good old shadow work, but you know, with turned up intensity. With turned up intensity. So I will share with you 5 tools that I find incredibly useful whenever you go through a spiritual purification that's called initiation on your path. Once again, initiation literally translates entering into new. So when things fall apart, when things don't go as you thought or your personality thought they should go, right? You begin to feel, a lot of times I feel energetically, and I begin to hear the weather, the spiritual weather begins to change. Let me know in the comments if you feel that too, darlings. If you listen, if you spend enough time with your inner being, you will begin to intuit the seasons of your growth. You know, there will be a spiritual winter. There will be a spiritual spring. It takes time to be with your inner being, to intuit the shifts in your inner landscape, so to speak. You know, sometimes I feel it like a change of the weather, like the wind, you know? Like in the winter, you hear more strong winds. And the wind begins to give you a warning that the storm is coming. But what a lot of times we can do, if we're not aware of the power of this process, we begin to get panicky in a storm. And we begin to become afraid of the storm, right? Like afraid of the lightning, afraid of the rain. But if you remember, the storm comes for cleansing purposes. The storm comes to purify and to purge anything that doesn't serve you. And after a first storm, second storm, third storm, you prepare your rainy boots. And you're like, storm is coming. I'm going to dance in the rain this time. Right? So there is the 5 things that I find very useful when I feel, ooh, the storm is coming, purification is coming. The first is prayer. I find every experience of darkness, uncertainty, unknown, turbulence, invites me to establish a deeper intimacy with my soul. A prayer is a true conversation with your inner being, a conversation with your prime creator, the source consciousness that animates your soul. And having that conversation with your inner being on a daily basis, not only when SHIT hits the fan, right? But as a cultivating of your intimacy, of your soul aliveness, keeping your inner compass sharp and connected to the quantum field. That's the purpose of prayer. For guidance, for vision, for listening. The second one is service. Whenever I find myself in a really challenging experience, instead of becoming self-obsessed and falling apart, sometimes it's necessary to fall apart, and I do it by my altar, my devotional altar. That's the place where I give myself ultimate permission to fall apart if that's what is required for the moment. But if I find myself staying in the fall apart state for a little bit too long, and I really want to change my mindset, to change my attitude about what I'm experiencing, I find the practice number 2, which is service. And it doesn't have to look like how I am delivering service right now, right? It can be volunteering at your local soup kitchen, going and talking to people who don't have a home, right? To give yourself a contrast, awaken yourself to a reality that even in your most difficult, dark moment, you still have it good. And your attitude begins to change. And you begin to open your mind to a possibility. You begin to feel appreciation. You begin to soften. You begin to open. So service, darlings. The moment, because there could be, I find there is this slight, there is such a fine line between being with yourself in compassion and feeling your darkness and honoring your darkness and embracing your darkness, right? As a sacredness of this experience. And with slipping into self-obsession and spinning in your mind, spinning and spinning and spinning. If you find yourself spinning, that's where you say, oh, Katerina said service. I'm going to go and talk to somebody on the streets. I'm going to go make you become useful. Maybe I'm going to go to a hospice, right? And maybe I'm going to hold somebody's hand. And maybe I'm going to bring a book and read somebody a chapter from a book, somebody who is dying. Anything that shocks you into a perspective, right? Very useful, darlings, very useful. The third one is creativity. Creativity is very healing for the heart. A lot of times these, initiations and dark night of the soul, there's nothing to be fixed. You can't fix that state. It's like you're going through a birth canal into a new you, right? So while you are in that surrendered alchemical state, I find it's really beautiful to listen to some spiritual talks, to your favorite spiritual teachers, and maybe buy yourself a box of colored pencils and a coloring book and begin to color, or begin to paint, or begin to, sew and knit, whatever, anything with your hands. It will calm your nervous system. You'll be able to channel turbulent energy through your hands. A lot of times cleaning or decluttering really helps as well, because a lot of times people don't know how to discharge restless energy. So they don't know how to discharge restless energy. Everything goes into their heads and they become trapped in their head. Let me know if you can relate to this, darlings. Right? So we got to move the energy, move it. And dance really helps. becoming like this tribal, primal animal. Connect with your animal spirit. A lot of times I put on my noise canceling headphones, um, because, I listen to my music really loud when I drive. Music really moves me. But in my house, I want to be respectful to neighbors, right? So I just put my headphones, my noise canceling headphones, and I just like dance in my room. And I get really primal and I get that energy out. So being in the body, that's another tool. It's easy to leave the body. If we don't understand the blessing of the pain, the fastest way to almost like a default is to dissociate, to escape from the body, right? So the alchemy happens when we choose to stay in the fire. If we escape the body, we're just going to make this process longer. We escape the body, we have not completed the lesson, right? So our initiation just going to double in size, in length. So staying in the body, right? And really just receiving a massage, floating thing, being in the nature, right? Acupuncture, anything like that really carries you through it. So the 5 tools: prayer, creativity, service, nature, and being in the body. Those things that I found are really, really helpful. And once again, darlings, nothing to fix. That's the big point that I would like. I'm always sitting like on the little cushion, and then my legs go numb. But there's nothing to fix. The moment I realize when initiation comes into my life, it means I am ready to go to a next level of consciousness. I can go kicking and screaming, panicking, complaining, or being stuck in my head and making the process so much longer. Or I can say, oh, I remember Katerina described that process. I'm about to shed the old skin like a snake. And I'm about to metamorphose us into something new. And this is an experience for me to receive deep intimacy with my heart. How beautiful, darlings. How beautiful. I brought you another book. It's by Elizabeth Lesser. It's a really phenomenal book called The Seeker's Guide, Making Your Life a Spiritual Adventure. So it goes like this. Elizabeth, it's like a manual, it's so well written. It's all about embracing the darkness and really honoring the darkness. She gives you a ton of tools in this book. It's what I brought this. I have many different crystals on my altar, and I was like, which one wants to come with me to this live stream? And I have this labradorite skull. I hope you can see it. Labradorite skull, right? It represents many things, but the skulls usually, they represent the seat of the consciousness and the sacredness of the darkness. This skull's name is Osiris. And Osiris, some of you may be familiar. Osiris was truly, he was a ruler of Egypt with his beloved wife Isis. And Osiris is really in charge of helping the souls to cross after death into their next incarnation, right? So just how pain is the other side of joy. It comes together like 2 sides of the same coin. Life and death are parts of our experience, and we can experience many mini deaths on our journeys, right? A death of the ego or a death of the old identity, like shaking of the skin. And the more we can be willing to receive that with honor, with willingness, with softness, right? The deeper we can grow our roots. There's this metaphor: the stronger the roots, you don't need to fear the wind if you have strong roots. Something like that. But I find it to be so true. Every initiation helps you build strong root system, right? Have you ever seen those trees that grow on mountain, like complete mountain? I don't know how they hatch their roots there, but they do. And a lot of times, when I see those trees and they able to live and to thrive with the minimal soil, I feel humbled because I have it much easier as a human being. Yeah, nothing to fix, darlings, nothing to fix. Simply be with the process. And it's a great honor to receive either one. They're my favorite author, one of my favorite author, Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist nun. She has her book called When Things Fall Apart. I recommend that book too. So I gave you 3 books, right? 3 books. But it's incredibly healing to understand that there is a path and there is a flow to this experience. It is not a random adversary that comes your way. It is not a random obstacle or a random crisis, right? It's really to help us purge out old fears that we picked up from the parents or from our collective environment. Help us to grow deep roots. Help us release control. Help us release our judgments, right? And help us to become that beautiful vessel through which divine can flow into this world. For some reason, I just see this image of a hollow tree. And it's this process of a spiritual path is being emptied out by spirit, being emptied out from within of our insistence on our human fantasies of how things should go, of what we think we know love is, what we think truth is, right? All the noise in our heads. And the Great Spirit, the moment you give it permission, right? You surrender your life at the altar of Spirit. You say, Great Spirit, lead the way. And the great work begins, the great alchemy begins of transformation of your consciousness from lead into the spiritual gold. And the rewards, maybe some say, Katerina, this sounds, what is the reward? What is the reward of this? The reward, my love, is the fearless spirit, is unlimited connection to true power and wisdom and truth. I am so grateful for every initiation because there's very, very, very few things that worry me anymore, And it's really powerful where you able to, I'm going to say a word, endure the difficulty that the Spirit brings to you with nobility, without panic, with grace, knowing that you can still be useful, you can still serve and support somebody who is going through a much more difficult time than you. You can still find compassion, right? And that's the alchemy of consciousness. I would say, working with ascended masters for quite some time, what they help me remember is that if there is a certificate that you can receive after your human incarnation, right? Let's just say there is a certificate. You finished this life and you're like, oh gosh, that was rough. It was great, amazing. What an experience. Wow, that physical sensuality, amazing delights of senses, and all that beautiful planet and adventures. But wow, sometimes this was rough, right? So let's imagine there is a certificate of completion of human journey. And on the level of the soul, what would delight the soul? If we become a graduates of compassion, degree of compassion, and eventually this is what ascended masters become. Ascended masters are benevolent beings who are humans just like us, who have activated their DNA, activated their divine blueprint, their light body. And they had all the opportunity to completely just forget this human experience, but they chose to become guides for humanity because they have mastered the highest quality, the highest virtue, which is compassion, ability to keep your heart open no matter what. And that's what I believe, darlings, initiation can teach us. If you forget all of this, and my desire, if you just remember this one nugget, every challenge that comes your way is asking you a question. Are you willing to keep your heart open, or are you going to close it down? That's it. That's it. I can feel pain, and if I keep my heart open, I begin to realize that I can enter pain with the open heart, and I can allow that energy to alchemize my consciousness into something beautiful and benevolent and fruitful. And I can receive my grief, right, with nobility and with dignity. And when things begin to fall apart, I can feel the sadness and maybe a fear of the unknown. And I can still find my comfort and my confidence in the hands of the Great Spirit that is watching over me, that feels my turbulence at the same time as I feel it. Would you like to hear our beautiful from the prophet? I'm gonna read you one more passage, darlings. One more passage. It's so amazing. Then he said, "Speak to us of love." And the prophet raised his head and looked upon the people, and there fell a stillness upon them. And with a great voice he said, "When love beckons to you, follow her, though her ways are hard and steep. And when her wings enfold you, yield to her, though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you. And when she speaks to you, believe in her, though her voice may shatter your dreams as the north wind lays waste the garden. For even as love crowns you, so shall she crucify you. Even as she is for your growth, so is she for your pruning. Even as she ascends to your height and caresses your tenderest branches that quiver in the sun, so shall she descend to your roots and shake them in their clinging to the earth. Like sheaves of corn, she gathers you unto herself, She threshes you to make you naked. She sifts you to free you from your husks. She grinds you to whiteness. She kneads you until you are pliant. And then she assigns you to her sacred fire, that you may become the sacred bread for God's sacred feast. All these things shall love do unto you, that you may know the secrets of your heart, and in that knowledge become a fragment of life's heart. But if in your fear you would seek only love's peace and love's pleasure, then it is better for you that you cover your nakedness and pass out of love's threshing floor into the seasonless world, where you shall laugh, but not all of your laughter, and weep, but not all of your tears. Love has no other desire but to feel itself, but to fulfill itself. But if you love and must needs have desires, let there be your desires to melt and be like a running brook that sings its melody to the night, to know the pain of too much tenderness, to be wounded by your own understanding of love, and to bleed willingly and joyfully, to wake at dawn with a winged heart and give thanks for another day of loving, to rest at the noon hour and meditate love ecstasy, to return home at eventide with gratitude, and then to sleep with a prayer for the beloved in your heart and a song of praise upon your lips. I hope I enchanted you with this book. It is called The Prophet by Khalil Gibrar. It's his masterpiece. The dark night of the soul is for awakening of consciousness, detonation of the ego, and the return of a human soul to the mystical union with the divine. Initiation is purification of consciousness of a soul that surrendered itself to the service of the greater good. Both in incredible experiences that is a great honor to receive from the benevolent creator. Thank you for receiving this live stream. I hope you feel more connected to the power of your soul and to the power of the Great Spirit. And another thing that I forgot to mention at 555 right now is writing. Some of my most honest, most potent writing comes during initiation. So I encourage you to write about your journey, tell your story, tell what you learned, share your wisdom. And remember, the only question is whether you're able to receive what life brings to you with trust, surrender, and a soft, willing heart. Thank you for all your comments. I am going to read through them and acknowledge them. If you find this live stream valuable, please give it a love button and share with your community so more people can receive understanding of this deep, deep sacred journey of the soul. Thank you. This was Katerina Satori, and may you have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening. I love you.